Welcome back to r/neighbors from hell, where people share stories about their crazy neighbors. And if you're new to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe to join our amazing community. And without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. And the first one is titled, "Neighbor reported me and everyone around him for years, so I built a fence in his driveway." Picture an old retired man living in a nice peaceful HOA neighborhood who has nothing else better to do but report everyone and everything. He has reported me, or threatened to report me at least, twice a year to the HOA board for various minor offenses in his eyes. The first time he put a note on my door saying he talked to my landlord about providing me garbage cans and how it was illegal to not use a garbage can. I had left my garbage in the bag during garbage day instead of in a can. After he found out I was the owner, his story changed. He called the cops so often on the one neighbor that the cop said, "If he calls one more time, he will get a ticket for disturbing the peace." This year was the final straw when he reported me for the garbage that appears after the snow melts. I received a passive-aggressive letter from the HOA stating that I needed to have it cleaned up, otherwise I would get fined. I called the neighbor and asked why he couldn't just ask me to clean it up if it bothered him so much. He insisted that nothing ever gets done if he asks. At this point, I am tired of dealing with him. The only thing he has as a weak point is his garage access. To get into his garage, he has to drive across my parking spot in the back alley. We had agreed that I wouldn't park there all the time, so he could get into his garage easily. I told him that if he is not willing to sign a lease and pay me a monthly fee to drive on my property, I'm going to build a fence on my property. He thought I was bluffing since he said, "Go ahead." This was the most satisfying hole I have ever dug. He can get in still, just not as easily. And guys, if you have any interesting neighbor disputes to share, then please feel free to either post these stories in the comments or, much preferred, on our own subreddit r/ripe stories on Reddit. Especially if you post it on r/ripe stories, there's a good chance that I might read it in a video. And the next one is titled, "You think that is loud?" So I live in a nice little neighborhood of condos and townhomes with overall nice neighbors. Keyword there is overall. You see, there is one pesky neighbor I have that just wants to be in everyone's face, just because they are part of the HOA committee. I've had a few run-ins with him before about little things, in other words, picking up trash cans at 6:10 p.m. when I get home instead of 6 p.m, having friends over and allowing them to use the guest parking, which is allowed, he just doesn't like it, or hanging out with my neighbors in their garage, having a few cold ones, absolutely nothing against this. Well, last week he finally got on my last nerve. I've had a Harley for a while and I use it as my main vehicle because traffic is awful and lane sharing is legal here, so it cuts my commute down significantly. I understand that cruiser-type motorcycles can be on the loud side, especially with aftermarket pipes, so I try to leave home as late as possible as not to disturb too many of my neighbors, and I haven't had any complaints except from this nosy a-hole. Well, last week he decided to write me up for excessive noise because he had gotten a lot of complaints about my motorcycle. I knew this was not the case because my neighbors and I have an understanding that we go to each other before going to the HOA, and he was doing this because I yelled at his nephew or some kid because they were going in my garage and messing with my stuff. I confronted him, and on grounds of privacy he wouldn't release any names of people that had complained, so he and I argued for a bit, but I just said whatever and left. Now here comes the pettiness. HOA a-hole does not park his car in his garage because he uses it as storage, so instead he parks on the street outside of our community, maybe 0.5 miles away from his unit. For the last week, I have decided to take a little longer route to go to my HOA a-hole's car. While next to his car, I will rev my engine to get going, and 6 out of the past 7 days, I have set off his car alarm. My wife will usually drive by a few minutes later, and she said he's been out there every day in his PJs to shut it off. And the next one is titled, "You left your car in the middle of the parking lot all week, so now you have to dig it out of the snow in the middle of a cold Saturday night." The parking lot at my apartment complex is long with just one entrance in the middle, and at my end of the complex it serves about 4 buildings worth of cars. Cars park on both sides of the travel lane facing away from each other. One winter, after a heavy snow, the snowplows come Monday morning and clear up the travel lanes, leaving a long snow berm behind the parked cars. Most of us chose to react as any reasonable person would. We would dig our cars out of the snow or used it as an excuse to prevent further human contact. Well, one of the lovely residents decided he wanted to leave but not put in the small effort of moving the snow. He decides to put his car in reverse and to gun it over the small snowbank. Well, the effort was enough to get his rear tires over the snow, and the momentum moved it to just under the front doors of the car. And there he stayed with his car tethering back and forth on the snow mound with over 3/4 of his car now in the travel lane. After opening his car door and assessing the situation, he just got out and went inside his apartment building, never to return. Okay, maybe he was in a rush and maybe there was an emergency and couldn't deal with it right now. Maybe he was just having a bad day. I'm sure he will come dig himself out this afternoon, this evening, Tuesday, whatever. It was very cold and there's a little more snow now, but nothing was melting away. And because of my wonderful neighbor, about 1/4 of the parking lot was blocked, with only smaller cars able to get past him, and that was only because others have cleared the snow berm on the opposite side of him. Thankfully, the guy that was parked directly behind him was able to exit with some help from a friend directing him out, but that spot then remained empty because no one wanted to deal with trying to get into it. Now, I admit I could and should have contacted the management, but the first day or so I assumed he would be a decent human being and move his car so it was not a hazard, and I half expected management/maintenance to see it while doing their normal rounds and do something about it themselves. The guy also lived in a different building and I had no idea who he was nor what apartment he lived in. Well, Saturday late night comes along and the car has not budged. My roommate and I were bored, alcohol may have been involved, and we were getting irrationally angry about the car in the middle of our lot. Our neighbor comes over to hang out, who had not been drinking. We are complaining about random things and I am looking at the parking lot and I realize that my neighbor's car is small. Not like a Mini or a VW, but small enough to fit in front of another car. A car that is in the middle of a parking lot with a wide enough walking path next to it. My friend has a pretty banged up old car. It was his first beta car he got in high school, so I expressed an idea. Obviously, this guy in the middle of the lot has no intention of moving his car anytime soon, so let's force his hand. My neighbor gets his car and drives it up next to the parking spot and tries to parallel park into the space the other car left behind. Not much room, so there was a lot of back and forth. He gets about halfway into it, but his wheels start spinning due to the snow and ice and he just cannot maneuver. Physics to the rescue, neighbor starts spinning the tires on the ice and I was able to just push it sideways the rest of the way in. We then proceed to call the tow company that handles our parking lot and I say, "Hi, I parked in a parking spot and this dude just parked behind me and is blocking me in. Now I cannot leave." The towing company doesn't come, but apparently calls on call maintenance. And now apartment management is there. Now I feel kind of bad. I meant to ruin one guy's night and not everyone's night, but they finally get the culprit out there after a couple of minutes. He is standing there not particularly dressed for the weather, staring at the cars trying to figure out what the hell is going on. He sees some marks in the snow and starts arguing that someone must have pushed the car into place. We were not able to determine if management thought he was crazy or more likely just didn't care because they probably knew it had been there the entire time, but they more or less told him it did not matter and he needed to move his car. Everyone leaves him there to dig. So for the next half hour we watched this guy dig his car out of the cold hard snow that had only melted enough throughout the week to harden into ice and make the task that much more difficult. Once he finally frees his car, he drives it straight into the free spot across from him, which was only open because of his negligence, and he then looks around and kicks my neighbor's tire before heading back inside. We giggle and move on with our petty lives. And by the way guys, a quick apology for the next 3 stories. While editing, I noticed that I must have recorded these in a slightly lower volume for some reason, so they sound a little bit different. Maybe you can just turn up the volume and I hope it will be fine. Sorry once again. The next one is titled Park Illegally? Pay for dumping fees on your security deposit. Hello, this has been developing for 3 months, but the revenge happened minutes ago. We live in a townhouse complex and our next door neighbor rents out their unit. A year ago, 2 blokes moved in and were very quiet and great tenants. 3 months ago, this changed. Our tenant neighbors started parking their truck on the cul-de-sac where there is no parking in front of their driveway. I spoke to the tenant when I saw him next and asked if he can park on the street like everyone else does. He said no problem and moved his truck. This lasted for a couple weeks and then the truck was back to parking illegally again. Several other neighbors spoke to the tenants and called parking control, but they seemed to miss the point and the tow trucks never caught them in the act. It takes hours/days for tow trucks to respond here. So now it is time for the petty revenge. The tenants are moving out now, which is positive because it will solve our parking conflicts. When these 2 dudes moved out, they basically took all of their furniture and then threw it off the balcony. The problem is that our HOA/condo board does not allow furniture to be placed in our waste bins. I was home on the weekend during their move out, so I took some photos of their antics and saw them fill the garbage bins with all of their crap. They continued to park illegally with their largest sofas in the back of the truck, and once the waste bins were cleared, they chucked the furniture in the bin. I know their landlord, so I made them aware of the HOA/condo board violation that will be charged to the unit owners. The owners of the unit have deducted $600 for the fees from their security deposit that they have been charged for dumping furniture. And yeah guys, that must have been one of their rare instances where it actually paid off to live under an HOA when it comes to getting revenge. And the next one is titled Newspaper Bandit. A number of years ago, the SO and I lived in our first apartment. In the place we lived, each unit shared a door and small entryway between the upstairs and downstairs tenant. We were downstairs. Since this was in an area where getting the paper was far more common than today, we opted to get the weekends only, as we typically would not read it during the week. Anyways, we noticed a few weeks into getting the paper, we would have to regularly call to get one delivered on Sunday because they never delivered it. However, Saturdays would always be there. Given we usually slept in until 9 o'clock, we knew the paper was typically delivered around 6 or 7 in the morning, and it must just be an oversight for some reason. So finally, one Sunday we had gone to bed rather early the night before, and we were up to hear them drop the paper around 6:30 one Sunday. About 30 seconds after, we hear the steps of our upstairs neighbor slowly creeping down the stairs, opening his door, and then go right back upstairs. It was at this point we discovered, very quickly, where our Sunday paper was going. To the schmuck upstairs, as it wasn't in the hallway where it was just dropped. Instead of facing this scumbag, his wife just left him a few months before because he was a bit of a selfish a-hole, as we learned from his soon-to-be ex, who we still saw in town. I decided it was time to get my version of revenge. The problem was, he was up early and knew if we reported our paper not delivered, we wouldn't lose out and they would just drop another, hence free paper for him. So, next Sunday, I got up extra early and had taken the previous Sunday's paper and put rubber bands all around it with a note right underneath that read something along the lines of, "Dear neighbor X, we know you have been taking our paper the last few weeks, and it is really sad that you have to steal ours and not pay for a subscription yourself. If you want a Sunday paper, get your own subscription, but I think we both know that you're probably not going to do that. I'd be glad to give you ours when we are done, but the odds are you probably won't have the guts to answer us at all here. Sincerely, X." I then put the paper into one of the plastic bags it is normally delivered in, and then I waited. 6:30 almost on the dot, I hear the outer door open and hear the drop of the paper. Quietly, I then quickly open my own door, grab the newspaper and place the old one down. Sure enough, about 10 seconds after I quietly close my door, I hear the footsteps coming to get my damn paper. But this time, I am giddy with excitement knowing he is gonna be so shocked. Sure enough, I am now watching through the peeper in my door as I see him bend down to pick up my paper. Oh, so quietly, and then retreat back to his apartment. As he starts to quietly creep back up his stairs, I hear him go about 2 to 3 steps up, stop, and then turn around and come back down. Sure enough, as I am still watching, I see him open his door and quietly place the paper back on the floor. He then shuts his door and I can hear him now going back upstairs, most likely with his proverbial tail between his legs. Needless to say, I felt vindicated as we never saw our papers disappear again for the last 6 months he was there before he finally moved out. And as for how he was to us going forth, we really didn't talk to him as it was once his wife left, she was the friendly one. And ripe stars, if you enjoy the neighbor stories, then please don't forget to post some star emojis in the comments and maybe even like the video if you enjoy my content. Thank you so much in advance, your help is very much appreciated. The next one is titled "Hit my car and block my driveway, enjoy my parking trap." So this story didn't happen to me directly, but to my brother years ago. As for the backstory, we lived in a fully detached house with a 2-car garage, 4-car driveway. The street is a circle and all the houses and driveways are separated by sections of grass. Since our house was a corner lot in the circle, the driveway space was tapered at the end. But this did not really affect our driveway as we had a bigger property line than our neighbor. Our original neighbors made a deal with my parents to get rid of the grass barrier to make a larger driveway entrance for both houses, but mainly theirs. Now here is where the story begins. Probably 10 years later, new neighbors moved in. Now, because the driveways are basically joined together, if we parked on the left and they parked on the right, you could back your cars up into each other if you don't park properly. Now, we would always park parallel to our garage boundary lines so the cars were square to the house. If the neighbors did the same, there would be no problem. So one day, my brother's girlfriend was staying overnight and she parked on the left side of our driveway. When she went outside the next morning, she noticed both the driver door and driver rear doors were completely smashed in. The only way it could have happened is if the neighbors backed their cars right into hers. When the neighbors got home, my brother inspected their car to find a real crappy repair job had been done. The paint was not even dry yet. They essentially tried to lie and say it was not them who did the damage, but my brother is not one to mess with. He works with cars all the time and knew exactly what happened. After a few hours of cussing them out, they finally admitted to what happened and would only pay if they could choose the repair shop. Obviously we said no, got them to go through their insurance and it all got sorted out. Well, kind of. Now here is where my brother gets petty. At this point they become extremely rude to us and my brother hated them. They would purposely park to block the entrance to our driveway by having the rear end of their cars stick out into our driveway. We basically could not use the left side of the driveway without risk or fear of them backing into our cars. It was a real pain in the butt. My brother had 2 cars at the time and one was a POS 96 Civic hatchback, and to teach them a lesson, he started to park his car at the very left bottom part of our driveway, but still within our property line. When they parked on the right side, he would purposefully move his car there to somewhat block them in, only leaving inches if not centimeters of space between the cars. Because the car was a POS, he didn't care if they hit it, as they would just end up with damage to their nicer cars as well. To get out, they would have to move other cars and pull forward to exit using the left side of their driveway instead. We kept this up for months until finally they stopped blocking our driveway and eventually moved away. And sadly, Ripe Stars, we have already reached the end of the video. However, as usual, if you cannot get enough of my videos, I would suggest you to check out my endless binge watch playlist, which will show up very soon on the left side of the screen. In addition, please don't forget to check out my Patreon at patreon.com/ripeyoutube for more exclusive Reddit content. Mainly, at least at the moment, just no mother-in-law videos. In addition, guys, I would just like to say we are super close to 50,000 subscribers, so I would really appreciate if you could subscribe to the channel. It would be a dream come true to finally reach 50k. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.